Good afternoon, and welcome to the 4th Sport and Society in America Conference. I'm Keith Sharoni, Professor of Economics here at St. Norbert College and Conference Director. We have what I believe is an exciting several days of events and activities planned for you, and I thank you for joining us. The topic of this year's conference is the business of college sports, and included in the program are keynote addresses from Barry Alvarez, the athletic director at the University of Wisconsin, and Jeffrey Kessler, a sports labor attorney with Winston & Strahl Law Firm. Our Wednesday panel, which will explore the student-athlete experience, includes Anna DeForge, a two-time All-American with the University of Nebraska women's basketball team, Darren Rovell, sports business analyst with ESPN Sports, and Aaron Taylor, college football analyst with CBS Sports. You'll learn. And former Green Bay Packer. Thank you. You'll learn more about these exciting people as the conference progresses. Before we begin the program today, I'd like to take a few moments to thank those who have helped make this conference possible. As you may well know, the conference is a joint effort between St. Norbert College and the Green Bay Packers. Thanks are due then to Tom Kuffel, president of St. Norbert College, and the many SNC staff members who have helped us prepare for the conference and who will assist you while you are here on campus, including Jeremy York and his staff from the Conference and Catering Services, and Laura Lear and her staff from the Office of Communications. Thanks also are due to Mark Murphy, President and CEO of the Packers, and the staff who will be assisting us at Lambeau Field on Wednesday. I'd also like to thank the members of the Conference Organizing Committee, which includes, in addition to me, Mike Counter, the Director of Media Relations at St. Norbert College, Amy Kundinger, Director of Corporate and Foundation Relations at St. Norbert College, Aaron Popke, Director of Public Affairs for the Green Bay Packers, Kevin Quinn, Founding Conference Director and Dean of the Snyder School of Business and Economics here at St. Norbert College, Ben Hagel, Assistant Professor of Accounting at St. Norbert College, and Karen Clearman of St. Norbert College, who is the Conference Administrative Coordinator, and to whom I owe a special debt of gratitude because without Karen, there would be no Sport and Society Conference. So I guess in the end, we all owe Karen a special debt of gratitude, so please join me in thanking her. Karen, I don't even see her out there. Well, we'll thank her again later. Okay. So on with the program. Dr. Kevin Quinn has graciously offered to introduce the participants in the president's perspective. Kevin's been at St. Norbert since 1994. The many hats that he's worn here at the college include Professor of Economics, Associate Dean, Founding Director of the Sport and Society Conference, and in 2014 he was named the Founding Dean of the Snyder School of Business and Economics. Kevin's an accomplished author, having published books and articles in the field of sports economics. He's a regular guest on Wisconsin Public Radio's Ideas Network and hosts the Conversations from St. Norbert College television program. Please join me in welcoming Kevin.
Thanks, Keith, for that very kind introduction, and also for the honor of introducing our two distinguished panelists today. These two men have a great deal in common, including 8 years of successful leadership of their respective organizations. Each arrived here extraordinarily accomplished and thoroughly well prepared for the job that he has undertaken, yet remains a warm and humble person. Each has raised 4 successful adult daughters, and they give generously of their time to the Green Bay community. Finally, each has experienced the physically brutal work environment that is the faculty committee meeting. Paring down the list of their accomplishments to fit the allotted time here was really like trying to write the Cliff's Notes of the Bible, but I'll give it a try. Tom Kunkel was born and raised in Evansville, Indiana, and he holds both his bachelor's and master's degrees from Evansville University. His stellar career as a newspaperman included leadership positions with the San Jose Mercury News, the Miami Herald, the New York Times, the Cincinnati Post, and others. He has authored 6 books, including last year's Man in Profile, and is one of the leading authorities on the 20th century New York literary scene. Tom joined the college in 2008 as our 7th president after 8 very successful years as the dean of the Merrill College of Journalism at the University of Maryland. Under his leadership, Merrill became one of the premier schools of journalism in the country. Tom's St. Norbert College presidency has been transformational. The college has just completed its most ambitious and most successful capital campaign in its history, with more than $100 million invested into the campus capital structure during Tom's tenure. Among the signature projects have been the Gale Mulva Science Center, Michaels Commons, Schneider Stadium, the Mulva Library, Grease Hall, the Aaron's Family Welcome Center, Todd Weir Hall, the Cassandra Voss Center, and coming soon, the Mulva Family Fitness and Sports Center. So if you get a chance to tour the campus, please do. It's beautiful. Tom has also overseen numerous other innovations at the college, including the launch of the Masters of Liberal Studies and Masters of Business Administration programs, a partnership with the Medical College of Wisconsin, which has brought a med school to our campus, the adoption of a new undergraduate general education program, and of course, the Sport and Society Conference with Mark and the Packers. The college has consequently enjoyed record enrollments and exceptional financial health, and it continues to rise in the ranks of the nation's top liberal arts colleges. He is beloved by our students who affectionately refer to him by his rap name, T-Kunks. That's true, not the rap part, but.
Or the affection.
Mark Murphy was born in Fulton, New York, a town in north central New York. His family eventually settled in the Buffalo area, where he was a three-sport high school athlete. He was named the best all-around athlete in Western New York in his senior year and is a member of the Greater Buffalo Sports Hall of Fame. After starring on the Colgate University football team, he signed with the Washington Redskins in 1977. He quickly became their starting defensive back, safety if I'm not mistaken, right? And continues to be recognized as one of the greatest players in the team's 80-year history. One of Mark's career highlights occurred during Super Bowl 17. Late in the third quarter, the Miami Dolphins were up by 4 points, driving and threatening to put the game out of reach. Mark's interception on his own 5-yard line sparked Washington's come-from-behind win. And you can find that on YouTube. I have looked. Mark's non-playing accomplishments are even more remarkable. He earned an MBA in finance from American University, actually attending classes in the evening during the season, from what I understand, as well as a law degree from Georgetown shortly after his retirement. He served as his team's player rep to the NFLPA during the 1982 strike-shortened year and was part of the NFLPA's bargaining team during the league's 1987 labor strife. More recently, he was on the other side of the table as a member of the league's negotiating team for the current landmark CBA, which was a big win for the league. Mark returned to Colgate in 1992, serving as athletic director until 2003, and then as Northwestern's AD through the end of 2007. 2005 and 2006, when he was there, is regarded as the best overall sports year in the Wildcats' long history. Mark somehow also managed to find time to serve on the Chicago 2016 Olympic Bid Committee, which made the mistake of turning down his suggested slogan, "We don't have Zika and our sewage tastes better."
That wasn't a real success.
Since Mark became the Packers CEO in early 2008, the team has made 7 straight playoff appearances, including a Super Bowl championship. Off the field, Mark has made the Packers the model of how an NFL team should function. Under his leadership, the Packers conducted a wildly successful stock sale, expanded their world-class retail operation, and have undertaken a substantial renovation of Lambeau Field, the Lambeau Atrium, and the team's practice facilities. The Titletown District development project currently underway will ensure the financial resources needed to maintain an elite NFL franchise. I genuinely believe that if Mark stays with the league even just a little bit longer, and I hope here in town, that he'll be inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame as one of the most significant figures in the league's rich history. Please help me welcome these two guys.
Thank you very much, Kevin. Good afternoon, everybody. Right, that's right. Thank you for that generous dual introduction. Unfortunately, we're out of time, so thank you for coming.
Now, Tom, they didn't mention that you're on our board.
Well,
I thought that would be the lead. Tom has been a member of our board, 5 years?
I think it's about right. No. I think they still don't believe it here, Mark. They've assessed my football acumen, and they still think that you guys made a mistake. And I will just remind everybody, that is one of the things I'm most proud of. I am proud to be a member of the Green Bay Packer board, and the year I was appointed, we won the Super Bowl. I'm just saying. So draw your own conclusions. I'm tremendously proud of that, but I have to say I think I'm even more proud of the fact that the college, St. Norbert College and the Green Bay Packers have a long mutual relationship and a very positive one that goes back to the year before Lombardi joined the team. His predecessor, Scooter, help me, Rich. McLean cut a deal with Father Burke, our president, to have their training here. Scooter promptly went 10-1. I think that season got fired, and Vince Lombardi came in, and he loved the college. He loved the Norbertine fathers, and they had and made it a permanent relationship. And so it's been we are pushing, coming up on almost 60 years, which is. But I'm prouder of the fact that, and I really want to thank Mark publicly. The Packers have been so supportive of the college in so many ways, ways big and small, and in ways that get seen, and in ways that don't get seen, including financial support for some of our programs. They're going to be a financial supporter of the Schultes renovation that you talked about, and in so many other ways. So anyway, we really do appreciate that, Mark. One of the things Mark has done is just really expanded the philanthropic reach of the team through in Greater Green Bay and throughout Wisconsin.
Well, we're very proud of our relationship with St. Norbert. It's very unique within the league. I think we have the longest standing relationship in terms of training camp. And this, I think this is the only case where a professional sports team and a college have teamed up for a conference like this. So
It
really very unique.
In fact, it's inconceivable, actually, that another franchise would do that. There's no real upside, but one of the reasons this has worked is, and Mark appreciates, as somebody that's been in the academic environment in a number of places, he really appreciates that, and he turns up at film festivals and other things that we do here. Just a word about the format. We'll plunge right into it. I'm gonna sort of essentially facilitate a conversation here with Mark. We're going to talk about his career, a little bit about his playing career, his sports management career. Obviously, this is about the business of college sports. We'll talk about that a little bit, and then we'll come out to you for questions. It'll move right along. Just so you know, the Secret Service are waiting outside. When Mark's finished here, he's zipping off to the airport because he's actually going, he said, to Charlotte, I think, for league meetings that start tomorrow. So we very much appreciate the time. Mark, so let me start in. When you were at Colgate, which I think is a Division I AA program.
Powerhouse.
Yeah. Did you
Actually, when I was there was no Division I AA.
Okay.
It was we were Division I, but non-scholarship.
Non-scholarship.
Yeah.
So my question is, did you actually expect to wind up playing professional football?
No. I had, I guess my junior year I started to hear from some scouts that there might be some interest, but I really never had planned on playing professionally. But when the opportunity, and by the way, there's a very interesting story that I will share. It's kind of unique, but so when I was a senior at Colgate, now it's so different now. I mean, now with Mel Kiper, every draft experts, I think most players have a pretty good sense of whether they'll be drafted and where they'll be drafted. Then there wasn't really the kind of coverage, and so going into the draft, I didn't know. If I'd be drafted at all, where. I remember one scout telling me, we really like you, Mark. I think we might take you in the second round. So I said, okay, well, we'll see. Now, the draft back then was 12 rounds. So, and it was held over 2 days. And the very first day of the draft, I get a call from George Allen, who was the head coach of the Redskins. Now, George Allen didn't like young players. He didn't like draft picks. He used to trade them all the time. He actually was fined by the league once for trading the same pick twice. So you can't do that. So they didn't have a full allotment of draft picks. So he calls me up on the first day of the draft and he says, Mark, we really like you. We want to fly you down here. We're going to draft you. We want to have you here for a press conference. And I was just on cloud nine. So, we didn't have cell phones then, but I go up to the Syracuse airport, catch a plane. And, I saw the Redskins didn't have that many draft picks, but, they obviously didn't pick me the first day, but I figured, well, George Allen told me they were going to draft me. Very first thing the next day, I get up, I'm anxious, I want to go over to the Redskins park, and the Redskins facility, and so they met us, and I thought it was kind of suspicious. There were about 6 of us, 6 players like myself, and they put us in a van. And they drove us, and now we were out by Dulles Airport, those of you that, if you know D.C., and drove us into Washington, D.C., and proceeded to give us a tour of Washington, D.C. And I hadn't been to Washington, D.C., so I enjoyed it. But I kept thinking, you're going to draft me pretty soon. We got to go to the draft. Well, make a long story short, the Redskins had no intention of drafting me. They hid me out. And so the second the draft ended, pulled me into the offices, and George Allen said, "Mark, draft just ended. You weren't drafted. We really like you. Here's a contract. Why don't you take a minute, read it, and sign it?" So I didn't know what to do. So I called back to Colgate, spoke to my girlfriend, who was my wife now, and she said, "Where the hell have you been?" I said, "Well, what do you mean?" And she said, "I've been trying to call you." Well, the Redskins had given the hotel where I was staying instructions to say that there was no Mark Murphy there. So nobody could get in touch with me. A lot of other teams wanted to sign me after the draft. So despite of all that, I ended up signing with the Redskins. I had a great relationship with George Allen. Was fortunate enough to make the team as a rookie. Just a funny story to kind of how things come full circle in the NFL. So now I'm in my position with the Packers, and one of the people I work closely with is Bruce Allen, who's the president of the Washington Redskins. And he and I were talking. I said, "Bruce, did your father ever tell you about what he did to me on the day of the draft?" And he looked at me and goes, "Quit complaining. It worked out all right for you." So the NFL banned that practice of hiding players out. So that was the last year. So that was kind of my welcome to the NFL moment. But to answer your question, I had no real thought, but I wanted to give it a shot, and I also had an opportunity to play professional baseball.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I played baseball at Colgate, and had interest from teams to possibly play baseball. What I liked about the NFL though was that I would know right away either I made it or I didn't, and didn't waste 8-10 years of my life going around minor league baseball.
What was your baseball position?
I was an outfielder. Yeah. And
how'd you hit?
I was a pretty good hitter. It's funny. For football, I had average to below average speed, but for baseball, I was considered really athletic and fast. So I couldn't figure that out. But I couldn't hit the curve for a while. I think eventually that might have been my undoing.
So, do you ever imagine if you had not played professional football, how your life might have turned out differently, or what would your glide path have looked like? What was the
Yeah,
plan?
well, I graduated from Colgate with a degree in economics. I had a job offer from General Electric. That was obviously at the time that was very. They had a program. It was called the Financial Management Program. And a lot of people from Colgate, they were headquartered in Schenectady, New York, kind of in upstate New York. And I think that probably would have been my career path. And it's funny, I look at our players now, and the amount of money that you make in the NFL, even if you were an undrafted rookie, your minimum salary would be, $400,000 compared to starting salaries of, $20,000, $30,000. So when I signed with the Redskins, my first year contract was $21,000. The job offer I had from GE was $14,000. So there really, there wasn't the huge disparity that you have now.
So you're back there. You're playing safety for the Redskins. Who were the quarterbacks and the wide receivers, the tight ends that you most kind of dreaded seeing on the other side of the line of scrimmage?
Well, Roger Staubach, he was towards the end of his career, but just a great, and that was a great rivalry. So had a chance to play against him. I think it's kind of the way the league's scheduling is the way it is now. So you really got to know the players in your division. But Tony Dorsett, I always kind of dreaded having to face him in the open field. He was such a great player. Pat Tilley was a great receiver for the Cardinals at the time. Drew Pearson, and they actually had a running back. I ended up having to cover a lot. Was Preston Pearson was a really good receiver coming out of the backfield. Harold Carmichael, who was about 6'8", and so it was very difficult to cover from the Philadelphia Eagles. The hardest I was ever hit in my career. This I think it was like 1979 or 80. Played the Houston Oilers, and I believe Earl Campbell was a rookie. And it was a real close game, back and forth. And their drive, we're ahead by 6 points at the end of the game. They're driving down, and they're on about the 5-yard line, and they call a draw. And I was the only one on our team that read it. So I come up, and I meet Earl Campbell at the 1-yard line. Now, normally when you would tackle a player like Earl Campbell that's that big, you would just go low and just chop him down. But since it was at the 1-yard line, I had to try to hit him high to try to knock him back. Well, just physics, that's not possible. He was about 5'11", 240 pounds. His thighs looked like somebody's waist. So I tried to hit him high. He did fall down, but he scored the touchdown. But I remember we were watching that game on film. Our defensive coach at the time, Richie Pettibone, said, "Did you get the number of that truck that hit you, Mark? Just the license plate for that?" And now, speaking of Richie Pettibone, the other thing he said to me, and it's funny, at the time I didn't think anything about it, but he used to always say, and he was a longtime player, safety, was a great coach. I loved playing for him. But really knew the NFL, had a long career, played with the Bears, and then ended up with the Redskins. And whenever somebody in our defensive backfield would make a bad play or make a mistake, he would look at him and say, if we don't get improved play out of you, we're going to have to ship you off to Green Bay.
Kind of like the Siberian front.
That was, in the 70s and 80s, Green Bay was viewed as, like you said, the Siberia of the NFL. Nobody wanted to go there. So that's one of the things I think we're proud of is that, of course, the league is so different now that there's so much publicity wherever you play. But, I think now Green Bay is viewed as a place that people want to play.
Well, for the rising football players in the crowd, when you meet Tony Dorsett in the open field, how do you go about tackling him? What's
so
the
much of
thing?
tackling is being part of a team and a unit, and trying to force him to go to your teammate so that so what you don't want is him to have a two-way go because he's so fast that he could go either way. But using angles and being able to try to make sure that you've got at least two people trying to tackle him.
You played for several legendary coaches. You mentioned one, George Allen, but another was Joe Gibbs, Hall of Fame coach, and you've said that you learned a lot from him, probably George Allen too, but what kinds of management lessons did you take from Joe Gibbs?
Sure. And I played for another great coach in Jack Pardee, who was a great player and had a lot of success as a head coach. But, Joe Gibbs, I was about halfway through my career, and I was captain of the Redskins at the time. So I didn't realize at the time, but I look back on it, I was very fortunate, that. So as a captain, I think he shared information with me, and he would come to me with kind of plans and ideas. And a couple things really stood out about Joe. And I think when you look at the success that he's had in the NFL, obviously as a head coach, but then also, heading up the NASCAR team, two completely different fields, completely different positions. And he's had great success in both. It tells you that, this is really an exceptional person, a great leader. Couple things, weekly goals and seasonal goals. And he always focused on, this is what, in order to win, these are the things that we have to do. Whether it's, number of turnovers, yards gained, things of that nature. The other thing is that I've tried to incorporated in my own management style is just being very accessible and open. And what he would do after every practice, he'd walk through the locker room and he'd talk, sit down and talk to players and ask them, how's the team feeling? What do you think could work this week against this opponent? And at the time, I thought, gosh, that's really kind of unique. And as I've kind of gone through my management career, there's actually a name for it, and it's called Management by Wandering Around, MWA. And, because the reality is a lot of executives, a lot of presidents, a lot of leaders say, my door's always open. Anybody can come in and see me anytime they want. But the reality is, it's hard to walk into the president's office and sit down and start talking to him or her. So
Especially here.
what?
Especially here
Oh yeah.
on this campus.
Yeah. Oh well, I know you have that reputation, Tom. Yeah. But if you I found if you get out and you talk to people on their turf, they're more comfortable, they're more willing to talk, and you'd be amazed at things that you can learn. And I think the other thing about Joe is just a really effective. I think all successful leaders are effective communicators, and he was just a great communicator. And it's funny. I don't think it's quite as dramatic. I've talked to one of the real pleasures of my position is that I have the opportunity to talk to players, some of the great players in the history of the NFL, but particularly those that played for Vince Lombardi and Dave Robinson and Jerry Kramer. You talk to them and they will tell you the first time they met Vince Lombardi, they knew they were in the presence of somebody special and that great things were going to happen. And it was kind of similar for me, is that Joe Gibbs had a genuineness about him that you knew things were going to be successful. Now, his very first season, we started off the season 0-5, but he never panicked. He stayed true to his beliefs, and the very next year we won the Super Bowl. And so and then of course you look back. I mean, really, he's the only Redskins coach that's had great success in the last I think he took him to the playoffs in 2001, 2000. So he's been a successful coach throughout the ages in different areas. He's just an outstanding leader.
After your football career, you went on to work for another legendary football figure, Gene Upshaw, who was the head of the Players Association. What was Gene like, and what did you learn from him?
Yeah, no, well, first of all, I'm very thankful to Gene. He gave me my first job after my NFL career ended. And, it's funny, at the time, I didn't realize how significant that was, but being in my position now, how hard it is to kind of created a position for me. And so I'm very appreciative. I thought Gene was a great leader. The things he did, and he and so he was president of the Players Association when he was an active player. And he and I ended up being vice president of the Players Union as I was, while I was an active player. And, I think he really had a appreciation for what it's like to play in the NFL, sacrifices you have to make. And the other thing, he wasn't afraid to take tough positions. And, he established a really great working relationship with Paul Tagliabue, which, quite honestly now, we don't have a good working relationship with the union. It's a shame, but everything's a battle, everything's a fight. So I think Gene knew how to pick his fights, knew what the priorities were, and had a great appreciation for the game. And at the end of the day, he would do what he thought was right for the game of football and for the NFL. Not always, trying to take a position that just for the Players Association.
From that vantage point in the Players Association,
you can tell that he's a former reporter, can't you?
No.
I mean, he's very comfortable asking these questions.
Oh, we're just getting started. No. So from that interesting vantage point of the Players Association, what were your initial impressions of the NFL as a corporate structure, and what impressions of team ownership did you carry away from? And then related to that, you mentioned Paul Tagliabue. What was his impact on you? So talk about all that.
Yeah, no, thanks. It was completely different times. The relationship between players and management then, and now, of course, it became very good when Gene was executive director and established a good relationship. But prior to that, in the late 70s and 1982, it was really difficult. There wasn't a lot of trust. I was actively involved. We used to say when you were a player rep, it was kind of like smoking cigarettes. It was dangerous to your health. So if you were actively involved in the Players Association, it was a pretty good understanding that your career would probably be shortened. And so I really had great respect for other players across the league and that were in leadership positions. And I think we all did it because we wanted to try to help the game. And, you know, I really respected Gene. Gene, of course, obviously had a great career. But, you know, you mentioned Paul Tagliabue. This is kind of a real life lesson for me. So 1982, you know, we're in the middle. We ended up going on strike for 57 days, missed 7 games. It was really difficult negotiations. The owner of the Redskins at the time was a man named Jack Kent Cooke, and kind of a flamboyant, you know, just a real character. But he was asked, you know, what do you think about Mark Murphy? And he said, well, number one, he's a communist, and I don't support communists. So we were asking for a percentage of the gross. And so he thought, well, that's not real good when the president of the team or the owner of the team calls you a communist. And then we had a welcome home banquet that they did every year before he went on strike. And he said, now, this Mark Murphy is a fine, fine young man, but I do not want him as a business partner. So that was kind of the view. So in the middle of the negotiations, so I was on the bargaining committee, and because the NFLPA headquarters were in Washington, D.C., I was really actively involved in all the negotiations. And, you know, you ask about, at the time, now, you know, I think now I have the benefit of hindsight. I really thought, and the people, I really felt that management was dishonest, didn't refuse to negotiate with us. Now, maybe I was a radical, but that's kind of what I thought happened at the time. And I'll tell you a story with Paul Tagliabue. So in the middle of all these negotiations, Paul was a young attorney for Covington & Burling, a law firm in Washington, D.C. at the time, and he was also at the bargaining table almost every session. And although we were at the opposite side of the table and had different positions, he and I struck up a friendship. You know, he was a Redskins season ticket holder, and so even though we obviously disagreed on positions, we respected each other, and I didn't really think much of it. I really liked Paul. I got to know him, but about 5-6 years after those difficult negotiations, Paul became commissioner of the NFL. And at the time, I was the athletic director at Colgate. Paul called me up and said, you know, Mark, I was just named commissioner. I'd really like to get you back involved in the NFL, and put me on NFL player advisory committee that he put together and the NFL Youth Football Fund. And so I'm convinced I wouldn't be in my position now were it not for the relationship with Paul and the fact that rather than, you know, burning bridges, I built a bridge with Paul that, you know, ended up benefiting me now. In fact, I just talked to Paul on the phone today, so we keep in touch, have kept in touch over the years.
You mentioned Colgate, so you know, again, the twists and turns life takes, and you know, something important happened that, you know, eventually led you to here was when you were recruited to the AD's job at Colgate. How did that come about, and what did you think about it?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm going to tell you something, and you're going to think I'm lying. When I played football at Colgate, so we were Division I, there was no Division I AA. I think that started like 1980. When I was at Colgate, our biggest rival was Rutgers. We played Rutgers the last game of the year every year. So, and last game of my college career, we were having a really good year at Colgate. We were 8-1. Rutgers was undefeated, and we played each other on national TV. It was on ABC on Thanksgiving night in the Meadowlands, or a Giant Stadium. So you fast forward to now, Rutgers is in the Big Ten, and Colgate's in the Patriot League, a 1AA school. So it kind of shows you how things can change. But in terms of the Colgate position, so I was, my career had ended. I was probably 5-6 years out of my NFL career. Was working as a trial attorney at the Justice Department, and I really enjoyed it. How many lawyers here? We must have a few. Yeah. So you can appreciate this. I was 30 years old when I started law school, so I was a little older, and I was fortunate enough, quite honestly, I think that I'd made a little bit of money in my NFL career, so I didn't have to go right away to a law firm. And I think those of you that are familiar with it, kind of the trade-off is if you work for the government, and I work for the Justice Department in the civil division, you make less money, but you get more experience. And so I was in court all the time, loved it, wasn't really looking to leave, but Colgate's athletic director, a man named Fred Dunlop, who's also been kind of a mentor to me over the years, he was my head football coach, or my football coach, my last year at Colgate. And then he and I had kept in touch over the years, and so they didn't really recruit me, but I knew that Fred was retiring, and decided to apply. And Fred was really helpful to me in terms of the process, what the job is like. And it's funny. I look back on it now. I was 35 years old, had no administrative experience, and Colgate took a chance on me, and hired me, and that really kind of changed my career path immediately. So I was on a path where I was going to be an attorney, probably go to a law firm, probably at that point labor law or a labor attorney. But looking back on it, it was a couple things that kind of moved me in the direction of trying to get the Colgate job. I really did. I missed my involvement in athletics. I really did enjoy that, and so being able to get back into athletics was something that was a real positive. And then at the time, my wife Lori, and I had 4 relatively young children. And the thought about raising them in the Washington, D.C. area was not real attractive to us. My wife also, she and I met at Colgate. So the opportunity to be able to raise our children in a small town college environment, and you know that, Tom, here, it was pretty attractive to us. So was fortunate enough to get the job, and I was there for over 11 years. So. And just loved the experience, but being an athletic director at a lower level Division I school is challenging. You don't have the resources of so many of the schools you're competing against, but so it was exciting to try to build a program, and fortunately we were able to have some success at Colgate.
Well, that's a good segue, because so you did a decade, 11 years, as you said, but then your next stop was Northwestern, which even though Northwestern, not the most powerhouse program in the Big Ten, but it's still big-time sports. Yeah. And I'm sure part of the appeal was that it was, it afforded a turnaround opportunity, I suppose. What were your initial impressions when you got to Northwestern, and how did you sort of turn that program around? Yeah,
it's a good question. I guess, again, Fred Dunlop, who I replaced and was my former coach, when I had the opportunity to move on to Northwestern, he and I went out for lunch, and I said, Fred, I got this opportunity. What do you think? What do you think about taking the Northwestern job? And he looked at me. He said, Mark, you're a young man. You've got a lot of career ahead of you. You absolutely have to take this position. And so, with his blessing, I felt very good about it. The other thing, and the reason I think the main reason I was offered the position at Northwestern was, again, it was a bridge or a connection. The president at Northwestern at the time was a man named Henry Beenan, just a great, great guy, probably one of the best bosses, or the best boss I ever had. But he was, and you would probably know this, Tom, he was, I believe, dean of the Woodrow Wilson School at Princeton. And about 4 years into my tenure at Colgate, I was approached by Princeton about becoming their athletic director. So I went through the search process, And Henry headed up, he was on the search committee for Princeton. And so I went for an interview there, but eventually I ended up withdrawing because I felt like I hadn't been at Colgate long enough and I wanted to make a commitment. So, but Henry remembered me from that process, and when the position opened up at Northwestern, he actually had said, we should consider Mark Murphy. I remember him. So it was another good example of, you never know when connections and people that you might meet years prior could end up being in positions to help you. It's kind of the old saying, Tom, you meet the same people on the way up as you do on the way down, so you don't want to burn any bridges. But, at Northwestern, I just, my wife and I just loved it there. Evanston's a great area. And, looking back on it, it really opened up a whole set of networks and contacts for me with the Big Ten and in the Midwest. And if I hadn't accepted the Northwestern position, I doubt that I would be in my position now. I think the fact, that I was in the Midwest and, the Big Ten is so respected, certainly within Wisconsin and Green Bay, that I know that was very helpful to me.
Did you get commitments, or what did you going in? Did you feel like we need to do this or that if we're going to sort of turn this ship around? Because it wasn't. It's a great university, but didn't necessarily have a lot of athletic success going for it at the time.
Well, they had a lot of great coaches. I felt pretty good about it. I think when people think about Northwestern, they think about their football and their basketball programs. And across the board, though, we had some really outstanding teams. Women's lacrosse, I think, when I was there, we won 2 or 3 national championships. I think she's won 2 or 3 additional. Softball is a great program, tennis, golf, some of the others, but the higher profile sports we hadn't had a lot of success. Although, Gary Barnett obviously took Northwestern to the Super Bowl or to the Rose Bowl in the 1990s. One of the more difficult decisions that I faced at Northwestern was probably 2 or 3 years into my tenure there, and I was there just under 5 years. Randy Walker was just a great football coach that had a lot of success there. Died unexpectedly of a heart attack in July, right on the eve of the season. And it's funny because Randy and I had just gone through negotiating an extension contract for him. So he and I had spent a lot of time talking about, who were the strong coaches on his staff. And, one of the younger coaches that he really thought a lot about was Pat Fitzgerald. And so when Randy died, had to move fairly quickly, but decided to promote Pat Fitzgerald to head coach. He was 31 at the time. I think a lot of people locally were like, what the heck is he doing? But, I felt really good about, Pat, the quality of the person, and obviously I think, time has shown that, he's been able to, despite the challenges, and a lot of it's, obviously Northwestern's not Ohio State, it's not Michigan, but it's a smaller school with unbelievable academics, and for a lot of athletes, that's a real strong selling point. They want to get a degree from a great school, and I think the success that Stanford and Duke and Northwestern have had across the board, but more recently in football and basketball, is encouraging, and I think it's good for the NCAA when schools like that have success. That it's not all about money and high-profile programs.
So the theme of our conference this week is the business of college sports, and interestingly, some years after you left Northwestern to come to Green Bay, the Northwestern football team, attempted to unionize just a couple of years ago, and I'm curious to think, what was your sense of all that, and more broadly, your take, especially now in retrospect, your take on college athletes, whether they should be paid to play in a sense beyond scholarships, or just how you view all that.
Yeah, well, my first thought was, thank God I'm not there. I shouldn't say it. It was kind of a selfish viewpoint. No, I really felt sorry for everybody at Northwestern, but especially Pat Fitzgerald. You know, and the irony is, at Northwestern, they treat their athletes so well, and you know, for that to be the program that's kind of singled out as, you know, needing to be unionized, really felt badly for them. You know, and they ended up, I guess, you know, at the NLRB at the lowest regional level, in Chicago, ruled that they had the right to be unionized, but then on appeal it was knocked down. You know, to answer in terms of how I feel about it, you know, maybe I'm old school, Tom, but if you start paying the athletes, you know, what's the difference between the NFL and college athletics? And you know, you can't just pay football players. I mean, it would have to be across the board. It have to be equitable in terms of gender. And you know, I guess I look at it as the benefit that you get of getting a free education at some of the best schools in the country, and yeah, I think that should be really the focus on making sure that the athletes get their degrees. And you know, the NCAA, they've done a lot. They've taken a number of steps where they're paying a lot more to athletes for cost of attendance, things of that nature. But if you start paying them, I just think it's really a road that, you know, you don't want to go down.
This is the audience's 2-minute warning, so I'm going to come out to you for your questions in a minute, so think about that. To follow up on that, Mark, so that's your impression, but as an attorney, as a executive of a pro football franchise, as you look out the next couple of years, what's your prediction about whether this will change or not, and why?
I do not see athletes being paid as you know, professional athletes. I think you'll see more and more, though, the NCAA and conferences being willing to pick up more expenses for the student athletes. I think that's a trend that'll continue. But I think I'd be very surprised if you know, the athletes were paid as professionals. You know, the other thing, well, you know, especially in basketball, this rule where the one and done, it's a joke. You know, I mean, it was when I was at Northwestern, we didn't have a lot of basketball players that turned pro, but obviously within the Big Ten you saw a lot. And you know, what these basketball players do is and you know, the argument is, well, they get that experience. They're on campus for a year. They have the collegiate experience. It's really beneficial to them. Well, the experience that they have has nothing like any of us what we had in college. So they do the first semester, they take the least amount of classes and do as little work as possible, just enough to stay eligible. And then in the second semester, they stop going to classes and they drop out because they know, now these are the players that know they're going to be drafted. That's a sham. I mean, it's really a joke, and yeah, I think that has to be collectively bargained. But I would either say, you know, you can go right to the NBA. You know, it's not like the NFL where, you know, you need the physical maturity, you know, and to be able to really play at that level. You know, LeBron James, when he was a senior in high school, you know, he had an NBA body, and so I would say either you play right away or you have to wait 3 years. You know, something like that would be better, I think, for the NBA and college basketball. Just kind of a pet peeve of mine there.
Thank you. So, questions from the audience, and speak up.
Yes, I'm wondering about the social media policy of the Packers, especially among the players, but also the coaches. What are they allowed to say? What are they not allowed to say? And when can they say it? Can they say things on game day?
Oh, yeah. Well, gay day, that would be interesting. Yeah. Yeah, you know, I actually see Aaron Popke here. Maybe you should answer this one, Aaron, our Director of Public Affairs. No, it's And it's actually, we have a policy and then the league has a policy. I think on game day, is it an hour before kickoff that a certain amount, 90 minutes, that they can't do anything. The last thing, what you don't want is players, during the game or at halftime tweeting out things. But, this is something that I think administrators, not only at the professional level but at the collegiate level, are trying to get their hands around. What's the proper policy? You don't want to completely limit people from expressing their own opinions. So it's really more, and we do this with our players. Now, coaches, I don't know. I don't think we have any coaches that are out there tweeting on social media, but talking to players about making good decisions.
Ted Thompson.
Yeah, believe it or not, Ted Thompson is not on social media. I know it's hard to believe. But just making good decisions. I think it's good. I think fans really liked to be able to see some of our players' personalities. When I was at Northwestern, we ended up having. Now this was social media was just kind of starting, but we ended up having a huge controversy on hazing. So I think it was our women's soccer team. One of the players posted pictures of things that they were doing inappropriately in terms of hazing the freshman players and hazing players, and it was pretty bad. And but that all came out because it was on social media. And again, first of all, you shouldn't be hazing, and number two, you shouldn't be tweeting about hazing or getting that information out there.
Yes.
I'm just thinking, I wish I had this lecture when I was 22 years old. And I just wonder how many college graduation ceremonies you've spoken to or something, because to talk about your career and the connections you make and the people that come back in and help your career along the way, the networking and so forth, is something I think has been lacking in my own career. And so I really appreciate the knowledge of how it can be done so well. And I think if you share that with a lot of graduating seniors, I think that'd be a wonderful thing. Do you speak at commencement?
I've done 2 or 3. Biggest one, I was fortunate enough, I think it was in 2012, was a commencement speaker at Colgate. So that was a real honor for me as a very average student at Colgate to come back as a commencement speaker was something that I enjoyed. And actually, I gave the commencement speak at NWTC a few years ago. But yeah, I do. I try to share, some of the life lessons that I've heard. Actually, at Colgate, it was right after my father had died. And my father, I think, like a lot of people, was a huge influence on my life. And so what I shared with the students was the pearls of wisdom that father had taught me throughout his life, and just shared some of those. And one of them was build bridges, don't burn them. And I think back, it would have been very easy for me to burn bridges when I was involved with the Players Association. I feel very strongly that my career was ended because of my involvement with the Players Association. I think the Redskins couldn't wait to get rid of me, so the strike was in 1982. I think they wanted to get rid of me the next year, but we were 14-2. I led the NFL in interceptions. I was a starter in the Pro Bowl, so it was kind of hard to get rid of me then. But then the very next year, 1984, second game of the season, I blew out my knee. And, I didn't blow out my knee. I sprained my knee. And the owner of the Redskins at the time, Jack Cook, my old friend, comes up to me and he goes, how's that knee, Mark? And I said, well, he said, it's going to be a few weeks. And he looked right at me and he said, Mark, doesn't matter. You'll never play again. And I never played again. So that was the end of my career. And I was really bitter for a long time. And actually still hate the Redskins. So, so boy, was it sweet beating them. No, I don't hate the Redskins, but but one of the lessons I learned was nothing positive comes from bitterness, and eventually I moved past that, and rather than because I thought I still wanted to play. I was competitive. The last time I played, I was at a high level. We were in the Super Bowl, and so I wanted to keep playing. But once the Redskins cut me, I never had a call. No team was ever interested. And looking back on it, it's probably the best thing that happened to me because it got me started right away in my next career. I see a lot of players. You kind of kick around, you play maybe another year, and then you try to play another year, and next thing you know, it's 4 or 5 years out, and you haven't really done anything. I was fortunate enough that I kind of got me jump-started into my next career.
So speaking of owners, you're about to go to an owners meeting, and you're in a unique situation because every other person in the room owns the team. You're the president and CEO of the only publicly owned franchise. Can you talk a little bit about how the Packers are perceived in that rarefied air, and also if you'll tell them a little bit about the last stock sale and how Jerry Jones and some of the others thought about that?
Yeah. I think we're viewed as different. Obviously it's the other owner, the owners across the league. They look at us like, But I think by and large, I think most of the owners in the league respect the Packers. Number one, we've had success in the field, and ultimately that's the most important thing. But for some of the owners, quite honestly, the fact that we're in such a small market, yet we're ninth in the league this year in terms of total revenue, I think people look at that as, listen, if they can do it in Green Bay, some of these other smaller markets should be doing it. So it's, but there are some that look at us, or look at me especially, I don't have any skin in the game. I'm an employee. You're not like me. You're not an owner. You don't have the same vested interest that I have. Kind of interestingly, Tom, my wife, she calls me a faux owner or a fake owner, an owner without the money. But Tom, you mentioned the stock sale. So in order to do a stock sale, we've had 5 in our in the Packers' 100-year history, or almost 100-year history. We have to get approval from the league, and so when the Packers' ownership structure, back in the 20s, there were other teams who were kind of owned like the Packers, but all those teams kind of went by the wayside, and eventually. The NFL, I think in the 50s, came up with a policy that you have to have a single controlling owner. But they grandfathered in the Packers. I think the philosophy is, we want somebody we can go to and we can talk to him or her and they'll represent the organization. With us, now we've got 370,000 shareholders. They can't bring all 370,000 shareholders together. So the league has the authority to agree or allow stock sales. And so in 2011, we went to the league and got approval with the understanding that any money that we brought in had to go into the stadium. So that was for our south end zone expansion. But as we afterwards kind of reporting, I made a presentation to the owners talking about the success of the stock sale. We sold, I think we ended up selling just over 250,000 shares for $250 each. And in the middle of my presentation, Jerry Jones stands up and he raises his hand. He goes, "Mark, I'd like to learn a little more about that stock sale and how that works." And I said, "Well, Jerry, I don't believe you could do the same thing." But yeah, he was like, "That sounds like a good idea to me."
That's right. They give you the money. You can't sell it. It's not worth anything.
Yeah. No, it's very unique. Yeah.
Tom mentioned that you increased the total profit from the rise of the was that something that was personal to you, or was it business?
Well, I think it's a little bit of both. I think it's important to give back, and obviously as a community-owned team, I think it's especially important. I think the Packers have always, they established a foundation. I think actually Judge Perrin started the Packers Foundation. But what I'm proud of is that we've been really been able to grow it. And I think this past year, our total community impact and our charitable impact was over $6.5 million. So our foundation is a portion of that, but it's not all. And so the foundation is, we've really, and part of it, quite honestly, is that we're in a financial position now where we're able to be very generous. We're trying to grow the foundation. I believe it's up over 25 million now, and so we want to continue to grow that. This past year, I think we gave out 1.6 million through the foundation. Obviously, we have a number of other donations that we make and do quite a bit. But one of the things that we really have tried to do, especially in the local community, is we established about 4 or 5 years ago impact grants through the foundation. So $250,000 can go, and the foundation's great, and a lot of the donations are 2, 3, 5, maybe up to 7,000. But as we looked at it, we said, geez, wouldn't it be really nice if we could give organizations a real large grant, $250,000. We do 2 a year, and I think that's been really good. So it's one particular charity that, and we've tried to pick ones that really have a need. For instance, Medical College of Wisconsin, when they were just moving to Green Bay, gave them $250,000 for their scholarship fund to help them get started. And then one year, rather than a specific charity, we gave to hunger. And so we gave $50,000 to 5 different hunger-related charities. So it's something we're really pleased and proud of, and hopefully we can continue to grow that. Now the other thing is that we try to do in terms of giving back to the community is through special events and what I would call economic development. Whether that's for instance the upcoming LSU Wisconsin game, that's going to have an economic impact much greater than a Packer home game, because you're going to have fans from Madison and fans from Baton Rouge traveling up to Green Bay. And so we estimate for a Packer game it's 13 to 15 million. I think this will be well more than that. So that's pretty significant. And then the other, I think when all's said and done, the impact that the Titletown development will have on this community, that might be one of the biggest and most transformational things we do in terms of positive impact. Hopefully, knock on wood, I think that's going to have that's got a chance to really change this community, bring more people here, bring more visitors here, and help the area in a number of different ways.
I'm mindful of Mark's time because he's got the police motorcade waiting to get to the airport. So maybe one more quick question, and then we'll have to close it.
Mark, the waiting list for Packers season tickets nationally, I think it's part legend and part myth. And I'm wondering if you could kind of give us the full picture of what that is.
Sure. Yeah, no, it's not myth. It's real. We've had a waiting list for a number of years. Actually, with the stock sale, number one, I think that brought a lot of attention, but then also with the south end zone expansion, we added 7,000 seats. That spurred a lot of people. So we were about 100,000 for a long time. Now it's 128,000 people on the waiting list. It's amazing. It's more people than on the list that live in Green Bay. We're very fortunate. The support that we get, not only at our home games, but when we travel, and the fan support that we get it's the envy of the league. I'll tell you a story, and I think one of the reasons that our fans are so connected to the organization is that they're owners, that they have a vested interest in the team. And so, especially with the most recent stock sale, we have shareholders and owners and fans all across the world, all across the country. A number of years ago, we played a game at San Diego, and more than half the crowd was Packers fans. And it was the first time in my long career or long history with the NFL that the home team had to go to a silent count because their players could not, the Charger players could not hear the signals because of how loud our fans were. So, the waiting list, it's a good indication, I think, of the kind of support we have. And the one thing, some teams charge to stay on the waiting list. We do not do that. We probably would have less people on if we charged, but so it's something that it's a little bit of a legend, but it's something that we don't take for granted and appreciate the support of all our fans, especially. And that's the other thing, with the stock sale, with the expansion of the south end zone. So we had 7,000 seats. So I think we had about 2,000 people come off the waiting list. And the people that came off the waiting list, because each person could get up to 4 tickets, I think. And the people that came off the waiting list had gone on in the late 70s and early 80s. So I talked to a number of these people, and I said, we thank you for your patience. Kevin, I think it's time to go, huh?
It is. How about a round of applause for the time that they put in today? And Mark, we know that you have to take off, but just before you do,
Well, all those long lines at Austin Trouble.
we do want to just recognize the two of you has really been the brain trust that put this together some years ago. For our first one of the 4 of these that we've done so far, in 2010, we asked one of our art professors, Bill Bonet, to design a piece of art in the honor of this, and he and Nick Wright, who's also another colleague of ours, put together the Palma Vincentiana. And if you look there, the coin that's in there, on one side it shows Vince Lombardi, who Bill Bonet knew when he was here. Bill was here, I think, in the 1300s, I think is when he started here.
It looks like a Greek Olympian, doesn't it?
Yes, actually, that's what it was. He was going for. Bill had a wicked sense of humor. And on the back, there's a Latin phrase, which I'm not going to attempt to pronounce, but it is one of Vince Lombardi's more famous quotes, which is, "What the hell is going on out there?" So thank you, both of you, very much.
Could I just say, try and get this through TSA?
Thank you so much. Thank you for the help.
Oh, thanks, yeah.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, very serious.
Oh, yeah?
Just a quick few announcements to continue on our day here. Starting at 5 p.m. today, we'll have a networking reception at the Robert and Carol Bush Center Galleries right here on campus. At the reception, you'll find the Super Bowl ring exhibit, sketches of the Packers logo designed by John Gordon, who's an adjunct professor of art here at St. Norbert College. And there'll also be photos by Evan Siegel, a photojournalist with the Green Bay Press Gazette. The sign up for the shuttle to and from Lambeau Field will be at guest relations table, which is located upstairs here in the Bemis International Center next to the Hendrickson dining room. And then finally, tomorrow's keynote address featuring Barry Alvarez will be held in the Walter Theater starting at 9 a.m. right here on campus. And very quickly, because now I see Karen Clearman, who is the driving force behind the conference. Please. Thank you, Karen. You do a great job for us. We really appreciate it. It wouldn't happen without you. Okay, folks, we'll look forward to seeing you at the reception at 5 o'clock. Please join in.